welcome to Learning with Lulu. In today's video, we are going to be doing a really quick summary of Chapter 4 in Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Before we jump into it, please make sure to do all the usual things, like the video, subscribe, and by the end, if you did find it helpful, make sure to pass along to others who may benefit from a summary of Chapter 4 in The Great Gatsby. So, Chapter 4, we see Nick going to the city again. This time he is going with Jake Gatsby though. Very simply put, Gatsby is trying to establish with Nick his version of his backstory, and it's a little iffy. Nick doesn't entirely believe it. So Jay Gatsby produces 2 artifacts essentially to kind of prove the story he told. Those being a medal that he said he won in the war and a picture of him playing cricket at Oxford. In this chapter, we also meet Mr. Wolsheim, which he kind of seems to be a shady type of businessman, kind of person that can fix games, like the World Series, so that people who gamble on, the team winning, so that he can pick who wins and who gets what money and blah, blah, blah. Really quick note about that guy. Nick notices that his cufflinks they look like human molars, teeth. End of the chapter, Nick sees Jordan Baker. We finally learn what Gatsby told her when he pulled her aside that one night at the party. Simply put, Gatsby's in love with Daisy Buchanan, wants to have Jordan and Nick help arrange Daisy and Gatsby re-meeting. They knew each other way back before Daisy was married, and Gatsby was a soldier stationed in, I want to say Louisville, Kentucky, where she was from, and they fell in love. He got sent to war. Daisy married Tom. Daisy's been faithful to Tom. Obviously, Tom is a floozy. And now Gatsby wants Jordan and Nick to help him re-meet Daisy. We learn that the green light that he was reaching out towards in the earlier chapter was a green light at the end of the dock at the Buchanan house, and so that takes on multiple layers of symbolism. It represents Gatsby's love for Daisy. It also represents the American dream. This is just my interesting little note on that. People associate the color green often with wealth, and if you know anything about Eastern medicine, it represents the heart chakra, or the chakra most associated with love. So there's an interesting note there. And that is the quickest version of the Chapter 4 summary that I can give you. So if you want to stop the video there and that's sufficient for you, there you go. If you want a little bit more detail, here's the lengthier summary. The chapter itself, it starts with Nick talking about all the people who attend Gatsby's parties, and it's just a long roster of the nation's wealthiest and most powerful people. The trip that Nick and Gatsby are actually going to New York for, Gatsby's invited him out to lunch in New York, so that's where they go, that's where they meet this Meyer Wolsheim. Nick rides with Gatsby. Gatsby just speeds right on the way there, to the point that he's pulled over, but you can tell that Gatsby has some sort of illegal sway because of his excessive wealth, most likely. Because the officer that pulls him over, Gatsby just shows him this white card. We're not told necessarily what's on the white card, and the officer lets him go. Like I said, Gatsby tries to spin this tale to Nick of what his backstory is. but Nick can see through just the inconsistencies. So he knows Gatsby's lying to him. Gatsby says that he is from a Midwestern town, and when Nick says, oh, like which one? He says San Francisco, which, I mean, if you know anything about the United States geography, San Francisco is not the Midwest. That's the West Coast. Among the other things that Gatsby claims, so he says that he's the son of wealthy deceased parents. Essentially everyone in his family has passed away, apparently, which is why he has so much money. He says that he's collected jewels from various capitals in Europe. He has received medals for, military accomplishment from many European nations. He says that he was educated at Oxford University in England, and he even has stories of hunting big game. And so he has this really larger than life backstory to himself, much like his parties, and just very grandiose. And it's to the point that Nick is skeptical. But then, as I said, Gatsby has receipts. He shows a Medal of Honor from Montenegro, and then a photograph of himself playing cricket at Oxford, or with his cricket team or something like that. So almost parallel that with Owl Eyes thinking that, all of the books in Gatsby's library were going to be hollow. There was substance to them. Nick is kind of like, this story, I don't think there's actually a lot to it. And then Gatsby produces what seems to be substance to kind of have proof of who he says he is. Just like the library full of actual books, proof of how wealthy he appears to be. Now, that conversation was all still happening in the car, I believe, actually. I don't think they were at lunch yet when he produced the photo. I think they were still driving. And then when they are in the city and at lunch, that's where he meets the Wolfsheim, who has the human teeth cufflinks. He is told that this Meyer Wolfsheim guy fixed the 1919 World Series, meaning he was able to pay off, he was able to control who won so that he could have any profits from, the bets being made for or against either team. It becomes apparent to Nick that this Wolfsheim is connected with organized crime and bootlegging, which at that time, it's part of Fitzgerald just creating this whole atmosphere of people's attitudes at the time. So think prohibition, think people just wanting to have a good time, getting access to alcohol that's been prohibited, hence the term prohibition. And Nick realizes that Gatsby is, if he's got a business association with this Wolfsheim guy, maybe Gatsby's wealth is acquired through some of these dishonest back alleyways, particularly with the bootlegging of alcohol. And then it is after the lunch that Nick sees Jordan Baker. I think he gets a little upset that she wants to see him so she can then talk about Gatsby. I think Nick is feeling a little tired of that being the focus, and he just wanted to see Jordan, and here she is saying like, hey, we actually need to help Gatsby to arrange a meeting with Daisy. What Gatsby wants Nick to do is invite Daisy over for tea, not have Tom come, and Gatsby is going to show up at the tea party and essentially kind of force Daisy into re-meeting him, but re-meeting him on his terms. So now Nick has to decide if he really wants to help with this. We are seeing Gatsby as a very multifaceted person, in the sense that, you know, sometimes when we say multifaceted, it means someone has a lot of different parts to themselves. The way I'm using it right now is to say that Gatsby shows these different sides of himself, show vastly different people, maybe even a bit contradictory. So where with the party Gatsby, we see someone who is just this magnet for wealth, for the wealthy and powerful, and really lavish displays. Now we're also being given this version of Gatsby that is just kind of this lovesick soldier whose heart has been faithful to Daisy all along, and who he told Jordan he purely bought the location of his house in West A just to be close to Daisy. Across the water, but close to Daisy in that sense. We know that Gatsby really has just been hosting these crazy parties to try and attract the Buchanans in hopes that Daisy will show up at one of the parties. You know, you get the sense that she was this very wealthy girl back in Louisville that Jay Gatsby fell in love with. And now it's a little bit, all of this outward show of wealth is kind of just him saying, hey, I'm worthy of you now, Daisy. And he's hoping that she's going to show up at one of his parties and see that this man that she had fallen in love with years before is her equal and worthy of her love, because he's just as wealthy now and can provide for her now, more so than he could back when they fell in love. So anyway, he wants Nick to have Daisy come to tea and he's going to show up at it. That's a slightly longer version of the summary of chapter 4. So if you have any questions pertaining to the summary of the chapter or any details that I did touch on, then let me know in the comments down below. I hope that some of you are perhaps reading the chapter and then just using these to kind of consolidate or make sense of what you read. I know sometimes some of us struggle with really comprehending what we may have just read, especially if it's been a long chapter or we're not familiar with the style of writing or the verbiage. So let me know your thoughts on the chapter, especially if you did read the whole thing, so you do kind of have some of those more finer details. Let me know what you think of them. And anyway, as I said, please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with others you know may benefit, and comment any thoughts you have. I so appreciate you watching and supporting my channel by watching and listening to these videos. So thank you, and I hope to see you back around. Bye.